Welcome back, my fellow Supergenes. I want to start today's episode with a question. How many times in your life have you been made to feel too much, too emotional, too sensitive, too reactive, too irrational? Honestly, as I read through that, I can think of so many times. And if you are a woman, I'm going to guess that your answer is the same as mine, too many times to count. Today's guest actually came to me through one of my own listeners, which I love because this community finds the people that we need. And the moment that I looked him up, I thought, hell yes, let's get this one on the books. And he has made it happen super fast. His name is Harry. He is a chef, a philosopher, a father, and more importantly, he's the creator of She's Not Crazy, which is a platform built on biology-based relationship education for men, and maybe even for women. Anyways, Harry has spent years studying hormonal and emotional reality of women from the inside out, not speaking to us, but to help the men in our lives finally stop dismissing us. He was raised in a community built entirely around empathy and human connection from a very young age. He studied philosophy, he became a health coach, and he is deeply trained in empathy and human connection because he also almost nearly lost his marriage because he didn't understand his wife's biology. That is how deep that this blind spot can run for men. So I knew immediately that I wanted him here today. And what I want you to hold on to for this entire episode is that this is not an episode necessarily about men. This is an episode about you, my fellow Supergenes, because when a man stands up and says, she was never crazy, what he is really saying is you are always worthy of being understood. You are always worthy of being believed. Your emotions make sense. And that is your worth. And that is exactly the Supergene we are unleashing today. So Harry, welcome to Supergene Unleashed.
Oh, that was a very delicious welcome. Thank you very much, Stacy. Nice to be here.
Thank you so much for agreeing to come. I was really enamored when I started looking at your Instagram feed and finding how deeply that you were talking about everything dealing with women. And given your background, like I mentioned, in philosophy and health coaching, you've obviously been very immersed in empathetic based communication. What I want to ask you first is what made you realize that none of that was enough when it came to understanding your own wife?
Good question. It's really interesting for you to list the kind of the empathy-based communication. And it's really interesting because as I started to dig into the biology, I started to slowly realize, oh, that's why I can't do empathy so well. And to give that, it's like I was very much in these empathic groups. Nonviolent communication camps was a large part in the community. My mother was a communication trainer. My wife was doing it. I did all this kind of processing work. And there would still be this part that was like in dialogues, in conflicts, in difficulties between me and my wife and stuff like that, where it would often be this thing of I wasn't quite able to meet her empathically in the way that she would have loved to. And I often told myself off for this. And of course, out in the world, there's a lot of this messaging around, well, men are just kind of emotionally stunted, something a bit along those lines. So when we came to this almost break, what it did for me, because she hit a moment of, Harry, you don't get to call me crazy anymore. Because we would hit these times each month where I wouldn't normally say crazy, but I would say things like, bloody hell, that's so irrational. You were completely different 2 days ago and doesn't make any sense and all this sort of stuff. And she hit a, hey, you don't do that anymore. And that was the part that led my more philosophical kind of rational brain to go, okay, shit, I need to do something about this. And I need to give it to myself from this rational perspective. I need to understand it. And that's what led me down the rabbit hole of chasing and listening to countless, especially female doctors, because I really decided it's like, if I'm going to learn about women, I need to do it learning from women, because men have spent such a long time not understanding women. So I started down that journey, and as I began that journey, I hit so many moments, Stacy, of thinking like, oh God, shit. Not only is she not unrational, she's more rational than I am on a biological level by quite a long shot. When I started to realize that for women, the biology is just on this, like, for the most part, predictable cycle that you can track, that you can be with, that you can understand, that makes sense. Because it's like, if it wasn't like that, we wouldn't have humans. And then for men, we're actually all over the place. We're kind of up and down. Our testosterone gets affected. Our football team wins or it loses. Our partner is ovulating or she's not. Someone gives us a pat on the head and a compliment, or they call us a name and an insult. Constantly being affected by the things around us, and women aren't. So it was an interesting step for me also as a man to realize that the reason I find empathy in this sense of like, I feel what you're feeling, that also made sense because testosterone and vasopressin don't lend themselves towards that in the same way as oxytocin and progesterone and estrogen do. So the whole journey for me was like, okay, how can I build this understanding from the biology that I'm in? And that's the route that it took me. And that's what I'm now trying to desperately invite other men towards, because I really want better relationships in the world. I want more children to grow up with both parents. I want more people to be more loving, because I honestly believe that if more intimate relationships were fixed, Stacy, the world would be a better place, like automatically. I truly believe that.
First of all, I want to just clap real quick because I absolutely love that you had the foresight and also that your ego allowed you to go down this path of understanding, because oftentimes you find that people, that's when they throw in the towel, right? When things get difficult. And that's where people decide to break up. And rather than breaking up or splitting up, you were so committed to your relationship that you decided, and she also made a decision, right, to support you in this discovery. But I think it's really amazing that you decided to understand a woman's biology. The second thing that I really want to acknowledge is what you just said about having more children with both parents and having more loving relationships, and just in general, people who are happier in this world. I mean, we are literally standing at a moment where the world is more divided than ever. So I really appreciate that you are trying to sprinkle some positivity in the world. But what I want to start to unpack now is all of these terms that you threw out about oxytocin, testosterone. My goodness, we are starting to get into a little bit of biology, and that's what I want our listeners to understand. So can you start by just walking us through what's actually happening in a woman's body hormonally across her monthly cycle? Because you also mentioned how, things can become predictable. And obviously women who are in their reproductive years have a cycle that they follow. So if you can just kind of walk through the hormonal part of things, and then also explain it in a little bit of plain language that any woman could recognize and acknowledge, oh yeah, I know that I'm in this stage, or my hormones, whatever hormone is higher than the other at that point in time.
Okay, thank you for that, Stacy. I will do my best to keep the language as simple as I'm capable of doing. I just wanted to add one last piece to the bit that I put in before, which was for me and my wife, the focus, the thing that meant we carried on and we really put in the work was that the focus for both of us was the children and not just to be together, but we had this strong sense of we owe our children loving parents. And that was the key thing. It's like they're owed not only parents together, they're owed loving parents. And that mattered.
Yeah, I really can agree to that. That's beautiful.
So, yeah, I mean, my broad understanding of what's going on in a woman's body is beginning at the first day of the cycle, which is the day of the bleed. And at that stage, essentially, all the kind of hormone levels, the major three of which being estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, because a lot of women forget that they have testosterone as well, are at their lowest. And so that's really like crashed out. And as they then move slowly up out of the bleed, estrogen kind of essentially rises and rises, a little bit of progesterone, but estrogen, which is often the one associated with being the most feminine, the more drive, kind of rises. And that rises pretty steadily and gets very, very high up until ovulation. So day 14, 15-ish of the cycle. Little bit before that, you get this quite large jump in testosterone. So for the women who will resonate with the feeling of around that day 14, I'm feeling a bit sexier, I'm more playful, I'm kind of more interested in intimacy, those sorts of things. That's often like this rise of testosterone that comes up. After day 14, basically estrogen and testosterone plummet. Average for most women is between 50 and 85%, which I said in one of my reels, the equivalent for a man aging at a normal rate would take him 125 years to reach that same kind of level of hormonal drop. And so it's like my wife and for many other women, it's like you get to that day 15, day 16 or so of the cycle, and something just crashes in terms of mood, in terms of how you're feeling. Often you get the pain around ovulation when the egg follicle bursts as well. So there's all of these things in the mix. And after that, essentially in the next couple of weeks, which is the luteal phase, and that's the phase where most women have described to me as like, these are the weeks I hate the most. Is this kind of lowered level of estrogen. And estrogen really is this hormone that gives the drive, the creativity, the playfulness, the let's do things. And hopefully what happens is a good rise in progesterone, which is the progestation, or the hormone that is preparing the body for pregnancy. You get this rise in the progesterone, and what's meant to happen, as it were, is hopefully a feeling of calm and relaxation. But it also runs up against this sense, and this is what I got from Dr. Sarah Hill, often this sense of sensitivity, of more annoyance, of more triggeredness, which Sarah talks about as being like, this is so useful, because what it's actually doing is the body is reaching out for safety, because it's a time when the body's like, I could be pregnant. And it's trying to make sure everything in the environment is safe. And especially it's trying to make sure, is my partner safe? Is he showing up? Is he available? Is he present? Is he caring? And that will run till then somewhere between day 28 and day 35. For most women, that's when the cycle then crashes and resets again. But again, you get in those, 2-3 days, I think it normally is at the end, before the bleed, where everything really plummets and falls again. I know for my wife in those days, she often would like to lie on the sofa and just be brought hot water bottles at that point. So
yeah, it's really interesting because a lot of, for instance, exercise science for women is now starting to be modeled off of the cycle. So as you walked through all of the hormonal effects and feelings, I was actually thinking about how so many times personal trainers recommend that, when you are in that ovulation phase, that's when you should do your most intense workouts. And as you just said, when your wife feels like laying on the sofa, you should do less intense workouts and these kind of things. So I could really kind of feel the waves throughout that time period. But I want to dig into a little bit more about, aside from something like that, when a woman is going through this every single month roundabout, and she is feeling such a wide gamut of emotions and having to struggle through that, how much of what gets labeled as a woman being difficult or irrational is actually a biological reality that nobody ever explained to her or the people around her?
I think, to be honest, Stacy, nearly all of it. And this is the piece I came to, and this is combined with. So I had a time in my early 20s. I think I was 21, and I was in university. And I managed to convince myself that in order to be desirable and sexy and fun and liked, I should have bigger muscles. That's what I convinced myself of. And so I started experimenting with anabolic steroids, and I was injecting myself with testosterone and things like that in the hope of being bigger. Anyway, young, stupid idea, didn't know what I was doing, came off them, and my natural testosterone had completely crashed. I had
Did you
been,
feel the difference, by the way? Like, did you feel
I,
the crash?
I really, really so badly. And I can remember going to the doctor, and so my normal testosterone had been pretty high. Like, I don't know what, I can't remember what you use in the States, but 1,000 nanograms per deciliter over here. So pretty naturally high. And my natural testosterone had crashed right down. I was 1 point above the bottom of the range.
Oh,
Now, the doctor at that point told me, "Oh, you're in range. You're fine," which is ironically, what gets said to a lot of women. You're in range.
okay.
You should be fine. Not taking into account that I was kind of normal for a 90-year-old man at that point.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
so I was going through zero libido, motivation gone, drive gone, energy gone, fatigue, depression, suicidal thoughts. All of this was my reality for some time at that point. And that was just through crashing of my testosterone. So now, when women tell me how they feel in their luteal phase after they've just lost the two major hormones that are giving them that drive, I'm like, of course that's real. Of course that's biological.
Mm.
Because even though what I experienced wasn't the same, it was a pretty close analogy. So when I think of that, I think a lot of what goes on is a combination of biology. And the combinatory part is biology within the context of being with a partner and people who are telling you you're crazy because of it, rather than taking your hand and walking alongside you. And I think that's such a big player. I know that the experience that my wife has shared with me has been, it's really different. Even my symptoms feel different because you're there holding my hand rather than telling me off for it.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine that that would feel so much more supported. And I want to ask what might be a little bit of an uncomfortable question as a follow-up, which is, do you think women themselves have been conditioned then to distrust their own bodies and their own emotional experience because we have been told that we're crazy or, to this, to that, that we've kind of internalized that label. And so we really trust the label more than we trust our own body, I guess.
I think 100%. I mean, our word hysterical comes from the Greek hystera, which is the ancient Greek for basically the womb. or people who had wombs, the wandering wombs of women that made them crazy. Our word for estrogen, oestrus, is not dissimilar in term. So it's like our very language that we've had for 4,000 years at the very least describes women as crazy. My wife, up until she did her own kind of work, thought of herself as crazy, and it's perpetuated everywhere. So how could they not? It's like,
Yeah.
it's like, and we have shitty education that. Yes, I can remember myself sitting in sex ed classes or biology classes, and as most young boys, you sit there at the back sniggering and going, "Oh, she said the word period," and it's certainly never ever spoken about past the biology into the experiential sort of realm. You know, what does this biology mean when you're in a relationship? What does it mean for the experience of the person sitting next to you? That's a very different thing, and that's never taught.
Well, also, what does it mean for a woman who might be in a leadership position running an organization? I mean, no consideration is ever given for that kind of circumstance. And frankly, women, what I want to say bluntly is that we're just expected to carry the torch and just pass through this and smile and, not be impacted. And if we shout out loud or we misstep or, have kind of an off day or behavior, we are, often judged for that. And people have that judgment that they carry on for years even. And frankly, that was just something that, okay, it was that time of the month where we weren't at our best. But I also want to ask you about two different phases of a woman's life, which are a bit similar to this discussion, which is the postpartum phase. I'm actually particularly interested because I'm 9 months postpartum after having twins and still breastfeeding, and I don't have my cycle back. But I also want to ask separately about perimenopause, because I am in my early 40s. So I'm just intrigued to know, what do women in these two very distinct moments of time also experience when it comes to hormonal shifts?
Wow. I mean, there's almost a part of me, Stacy, that when I get asked a question like that, I'm like, how can I even answer for what these fucking superhuman people do?
Well, you're on Supergene Unleashed, so this is what we're looking for.
It's like, it's like the more time that I spend looking, the more time I start building analogies. One of the ones I did in my recent thing was that, what was it? It's like for an ultra endurance marathon runner. And that's not as high. People get higher than this in like pure sprinting or something like that. But for an ultra endurance marathon runner, they're burning energy about 2.5 times their normal basal metabolic rate over a kind of, 90-mile race or whatever it happens to be. A woman holds 2.2 times for almost 9 bloody months.
Wow.
It's like, it's astounding. Whilst she's building a creature with her bones, with her brain, with her blood, it's like, it's truly insane carrying this massive thing on the front of your belly, and doing it all with a smile most of the time, whilst everyone's telling her that she ought to be kind of okay and happy and glowing.
Oh yeah, like acting like pregnancy is enjoyable and cute. Frankly, I didn't find it very enjoyable.
Exactly, and it's not that I take away from that. Of course, it's beautiful. Of course, it's wonderful. Of course, you're excited baby and stuff like that. You get the birth itself, which I kind of dodgily worked out would be something like the equivalent of 300 kicks to the balls for a guy, whilst being conscious, while staying okay, and then having to be gentle and nice with this weird little creature you just pushed out of yourself at the end of it. And then it's like, because it's astounding what happens hormonally in the body over pregnancy, because it's like estrogen and progesterone climb to for some of them almost 1,000% of their kind of normal baseline, because it's like driving the cellular growth, driving the metabolic processes. You get to 2 days post pregnancy and they drop by 90% in a weekend.
Wow.
Like,
wow.
All those feel goods, all those everything, just like gone with not to mention the wound that's left inside the uterus. It's kind of amazing. And so that, the more I look, it's like for most women, in quotation marks, it's sort of at least a 6-month period for recovering those hormones. And for many women, it's 3-4 years to really go back to a steady baseline. And of course, that's going to be further exacerbated depending on stress, depending on pressure, depending on other environmental factors. So yeah, I mean, pregnancy is just like mind blowing.
Yeah. I mean, it really is. And also women, that work are working through that. And even the countries, for instance, that don't give a proper maternity leave. I mean, it's just all around a very big adjustment. So I really appreciate that you're trying to draw a conjecture for people to understand what women go through with this phase of life. I want to shift over to the perimenopause because I'm also curious about the hormones in that phase of life. If you can share a little bit of details about that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, perimenopause is a really that's obviously the one that for most women, and obviously the partners of the women, is like this most frustrating time. Frustrating is a very mild way of putting it. But it's the time that you just don't know. You don't know what's happening week to week. There's all of a sudden, there's spent the last 40 years of your life since you've been 10, 12 years old, at least having this sense of, okay, this is kind of predictable for the most part. And then all of a sudden, the few years before it really sets in, you get this dropping in progesterone. And so often one of the first kind of symptoms that starts to come up seems to be like sleep gets worse, because progesterone is a strong stimulator of sleep and relaxation. And then this time hits and estrogen just starts basically just shooting up, down, up, down, up, down. And it's really interesting when you look at it through older cultural lenses, because many older cultures see it as an initiation. You're going through this initiatory period for 4 to 10 years, after which point you receive your crown. You become the elder, you become the leader, you become the person that others are looking to for the wisdom, for where to go. But up until that period, it's essentially just a roller coaster. And the only things that really I found, of course, there's HRT now, and that's steadily becoming better. But it's what was it? I was just on a live with Caroline Boucheret earlier on today, and I was comparing it to sort of men are this like for men, getting hormone replacement is like you go into your favorite cocktail bar and you just say, I'll have the Coke, please. It's one thing. You give some testosterone, you're kind of good. With a woman, you walk into the cocktail bar and it's like, I need your most complicated cocktail, please. And trying to get because it's going to be slightly different for each woman. And you're trying to balance 3 hormones, not just the one. And so that just makes it this dance of trying to go through. And I think a big part probably of what helps to carry it is, again, do you have a loving, caring partner on your side who's like, I'm here, I've got you. And yes, it's going to be a really hard time, but we're doing it together hand in hand. So yeah, that's perimenopause, as it were.
Yeah, I've been looking a little bit into the HRT. Obviously, it's a very popular topic, and I've understood as well that it is very difficult to get that cocktail perfectly right. And this is actually a really great segue to where I want to go next in the conversation, because obviously you built your platform, She's Not Crazy, to educate men, but I want to ask you about the woman and the women, because what does it look like for a woman who has really been in this place where she's spent years being told she's too much, too emotional, too sensitive? Have you seen from your audience, what does that cost women, and how can they kind of navigate now having this information to help change for the better, like to, strip away those labels from their mind and to move past it, right? And embrace it and understand that, okay, this is my biology. I should accept it and not accept and onboard the crazy label.
I think, I appreciate that as a thought. It's like to reframe. It's like, okay, so what do you fucking do to actually change shit? It's like,
Yeah.
is that piece? And it's like, and I'm holding the tenderness of what it takes to overcome years of thinking, of centuries of thinking, of millennia of thinking. And that's why I guess I've come to see what I'm doing as less of a brand and more of a movement, because ultimately it's like I want to see people teaching this to children from the age of 5. I want it to be normalized and spoken, and just be like, even with my kids, it's like, my daughter is 10, my son is 8, but for most of their life it's sort of periods. We just speak about periods. We just speak about hormones. We just talk about it, and it's normal. And I think that's the only place that it really comes in. Now, for women who are older and hearing and working with this more and more, my guess is it's just a constant self-reminder. It's more reminding, it's more reading, it's more gelling up with other people who want to have these conversations. Just bringing it into the space is a big part of how things start to move forward. And then on my side, it's like, okay, how can I find more ways, which is podcast, which is book, which is things like that, and just start shouting it. It's like normalizing it.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's super important, is making it a comfortable conversation where people are okay talking about it. And you said earlier, like, oh, instead of sitting in the back of the class snickering about it, that we can have just a normal conversation about what is happening so that more people understand. And I agree with you that it should start in the home, and hopefully you're successful in reaching some educators to inspire them to transform education. And at the same time, a lot of women who are listening right now are probably thinking, gosh, this is finally a man gets it, but not all men get it. And I'm sure that you have had your fair share of men saying things, because there's also the other side of the fence where there's some men who are not interested in, gender equality and these kind of things. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like well, first of all, what is the feedback that you're getting from men? And secondarily, for a woman who's listening, who might be in a relationship with a man that could use this information, but he has potentially no interest in understanding her, what does she do with that? Like, how can she approach taking this information to him so that he can understand her? Maybe talking about how you did it with your own marriage would be a bit of a help too.
That's it's an interesting one, because I think all humans, to an extent, but men especially, are creatures of incentive. We like to be given incentives. It's like, why? Which is sad. I wish that weren't the case, but I also like to work with the reality that I see around me. And of course, I've had both and from men. I've had quite a few men push back, who are obviously men in the manosphere. And a big part of me just has, I'm not going to reach a whole bunch of you. Really sorry. Wish I could. I can't. And I have the conversations with them at times in the comments when I have time and when I have energy. My intention is to get it as in front of as many men's eyes as I can from as young age as I can. And in terms of like women taking it to their kind of partners, again, it's like this incentive thing. Because I've had this conversation with a few women and on lives now as well, where it's been this piece around, men, you say you want more sex. Well, most women, when they feel safer and more understood, will probably want more sex with you. You say you want to have an easier life. Well, very good way of doing that is understanding your partner. You're going to have an easier time. If what you need is an incentive, there's a whole bunch of really good incentives, because for the first time in probably 10,000 years-ish of history, women are free and they have choice and they have ease and they can leave. Now, the divorce rate is just climbing. I can remember this divorce lawyer in the US who I love is James Paxton.
Okay.
Amazing guy. And he speaks about how 75% of marriages fail because over 50% end in divorce and more than 25% stay together, but they're unhappy. That's the cost. For the men, it's like the cost is that happens. And the science is now so clear that for a man to be in a long-term relationship with a woman, he will have a longer health span, a longer lifespan, a much higher likelihood of higher career earnings, higher likelihood of a good network, more friends. It's like the list of benefits for a man of being with a woman are huge. And so he has a really good incentive. Now, in terms of like the exact manner to approach different men with this, that's going to be a bit more individual. Different ones. Some people might respond well to being sent a video. Some people might respond better to being sent a book, or just dropping it in the space and listening to a podcast whilst they happen to be in the room. Some need something firm. What it turned out I needed in the end for my wife is to say, you don't call me crazy anymore, or actually we're going to get to a point where we can't be together. And being together really mattered to me. So my sense is there are a lot of men who probably won't come along for the ride. And the consequence, tragically, is that a lot of those men won't get chosen anymore. And that's going to take a while for that kind of natural order, which is throughout the whole of the animal kingdom, the females are the ones who do the choosing. And men need to learn this.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually something I also really wanted to ask you is, for instance, if a woman is in a relationship with a man who has zero interest in understanding her and who dismisses this entire conversation or thinks biology is an excuse, what is she choosing if she stays? And are you seeing more women take this information and use it as a catalyst to leave a toxic relationship?
I think women are already doing that. The amount,
like subconsciously, maybe.
The amount of women who have responded to my reels, I've got these bunch of reels that are like, women don't need men anymore. And the sheer amount of women who have written to me saying, based on the things that, I did years ago, what you're already speaking about, because I made the choice. I can't do this with guys who won't show up anymore. Just can't do it. So I don't know. I've probably got 10,000, 20,000 comments from women saying, this is the choice we're making. We want men who understand these things, or at least try to.
Yeah, exactly. And when you say that a woman doesn't really need a man, I mean, it's true. In many developed nations, there's so many women who are choosing to be solo moms, for instance, that are having kids on their own, and not having those relationships, but still carrying on and, fulfilling those kind of dreams. So hopefully you can get through to more people. But I want to ask, for the men who absorb your information and the ones that are open to hearing things? Like, do you give them concrete recommendations on what to do with this information? So what can a man do to be a better partner,
I mean,
knowing the cycle of a woman?
it's not, for me, the cycle and the hormones are a catalyst to good conversation and connection. I just finally got my website done. And in the website, I've got my first kind of little, call it the partner starter kit, which just has a few videos, a couple of PDFs. And the purpose of it really is like, first, like the kind of download of the information. This is what's happening. This is what goes on. But then the second part at the end is saying, like, use this in order to go humbly and with care to your partner and say, hey, I, the man, have been looking into this because it matters. And I know it's not exactly the same for every woman. So are you willing to start dialoguing? I want to be a better partner. I want to be a better husband. How does the luteal phase feel for you? How does the follicular phase feel for you? Let's have fun together. Let's do some playing together and let's see what we can create together as we go along. Because I think
exactly. Oh, for sure. So it's really, it sounds like it's just pretty simple, frankly. It's just about being open and, the two people kind of coming together with this knowledge and figuring out how to gel together at different times of the month. And so I actually, to close this out, really want to ask you for a final message for the women who are listening, who maybe have just spent years absorbing that, oh my gosh, I am changing who I am, doubting her emotions, maybe even apologizing for her reactions. What is the one thing that you would like her to walk away knowing from this episode?
One thing, it's that basic thing which I keep on saying. It's like, you're not crazy. And biology, not blame, for either. And it is that key piece. And I think it's the hard thing, and it's the piece I try to hold with as much compassion and care as I can. I also don't. Also don't blame the men. It's this piece as well, because blame just doesn't create change, even when it's valid, even when it's real, even when it's deserved. It's like, it doesn't create change. I had to not blame myself, but instead say, okay, how can I educate myself better? Because up until I knew it, I couldn't blame myself for not knowing it. I live in a culture that has brought me up in the way it does, and the way it has, and I needed to transform it. But that first piece for the women is like, please validate yourselves. You are not crazy. You are living in a incredible biological creation machine that we really need badly.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it's really, again, about what I said at the beginning, where it's knowing your self-worth and appreciating your self-worth. And, these are common things that I talk about is, we shouldn't change who we are for anybody else. And I really hope that that message comes through today for the fellow listeners. I actually just wanted to say, before we kind of wrap things up, for people who are listening, what is the absolute best way that they can come and absorb more of your content and maybe share some of your information with their partners if they are feeling so inclined?
Thank you so much, Stacy. So I'm at She's Not Crazy Series on Instagram and TikTok. I have a Facebook page, which is She's Not Crazy. And I've just 2 days ago finally uploaded and put my website online, which is she'snotcrazy.co.uk. That has a few different freebies, including a cycle chart, a 7-day email course for guys or partners, and my now partner starter kit. And before too long, that will also have blogs, podcasts, and other stuff when that gets up and rolling.
Wow, that's amazing. You are definitely well on your way to a movement. And I really hope that you're successful in such, because I definitely empathize with all the women who have been told that they're crazy. And I just want everybody to know that our emotions were always real. Your body is always doing something extraordinary, and our reactions always made sense. And now we finally have a man who is in our corner, advocating for us, making sense of the biology, blasting it on repeat. So thank you so much, Harry. And listen up, Supergenes. If you take anything away from today, I want you to know that you do not have to wait for someone else to validate your worth. You don't have to earn the right to be believed, and you certainly don't need to change who you are so that someone else can be made to feel more comfortable. Hell no. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you so much, Stacy.